Hello, hello, welcome. My name is Allie, and this is my weekly Monday evening live paint along. So if you are new, if this is the first time you're catching one of these, I do these live painting demos every Monday at 5 Eastern. And it's not just a demo, but it's also a paint along. So many of you are painting with me. I see a whole bunch of you joining in here to the live stream. Glad you guys are all able to make it on this beautiful Monday evening. Gosh, we're so lucky here in Chattanooga. It's like 70 and sunny out right now. I just love it. I would have all of my blinds open, but then you guys would get a weird glare. So sorry, it looks like it's dark and dreary here, but it's not. It's beautiful. Hi, Teresa. Hi, Letitia. Hi, Angela. Hi, everyone who's jumping in. Hi, Adrian. Adrian, you're painting with me. I love it. And Adrian, though these are not your flowers, I'm painting your flowers next week, Adrian. We're going to do sunflowers. This photo is from my painting friend, Kim Shaw. So I asked all of you to submit floral images for me to use for these paint-alongs, and so I've been kind of one by one picking some of my favorites that we are going to use for the reference image. So this one's from Kim. Thank you, Kim. It was beautiful. Yeah, and I'm excited, Adrian, for your sunflower photo next week. It's gonna be great. I have a little sneak peek for you all at the end of this demo. So I'm just gonna kind of run through how this works. So those of you who are painting with me, you have the outlines download hopefully already on your panel. If you don't know about this, I offer a download that you can purchase for $10 on my website, and it's a template that you can trace. So we do that beforehand, and then we just paint over the lines with a thin coat of paint. And you can always go back and grab that on my website and watch this as a replay. So even if you are watching and you're not ready to paint just yet, you can go back and watch the replay later. Hi, Jacqueline, you're gonna paint it larger tomorrow. I love it. I love seeing how so many of you are kind of doing your own thing with these demos. Like I've seen some people paint in watercolor. I've seen some people paint them really big. My template is 8 by 10, but some of you with some Photoshop skills know how to enlarge that. And if you don't have Photoshop skills, you should check out my new online class. Put a little bit in there for that. Digital Editing Basics is my new online class where I teach you how to do some of this stuff, and it is on sale just through this week, so jump in there. Hi, Melissa in the UK. Yeah, I love that you guys are telling us where you're watching from. Please do that. It's always fun to see. We have people all over the world who watch these demos and paint with us, so it's very fun. Okay, well, let's get to the part that you came for, and that would be starting the painting. So let's do it, okay? And of course, if you have any questions, just drop them into the comments. I try to check back as much as I can while I'm painting and teaching you. Welcome, Cheryl, first class, love it. But if I miss any of them, I always go back through after the demo and I try to answer all your questions, just typing some answers. So please keep those questions coming. Kathy says she loves the new digital class. I love it, Kathy. I'm so happy to hear that. All right, hi Helen in the UK. Hello everyone. Letitia in Fort Worth. Okay, I'm just gonna adjust my camera here so that you guys can hopefully see, let's see, we wanna get it so that you can see the palette and the reference image. Get it nice and straight looking. Jennifer, you found me, I'm so glad. This is your first time joining me live, I'm glad you made it. Okay, this looks pretty good. I think you guys can see some of my palette, right? And you can see the reference image, looks good. I know you like to be able to see as I'm kind of mixing colors here, so hopefully this will be a good angle. We've got Sue in Australia. Welcome, Sue. Welcome, everyone. Okay, so as I mentioned, I just traced these outlines and then I painted over them using a light purple and my skinny little script liner brush. These brushes are great for doing these skinny little lines. Mine's getting a little bit warped. Oh, we've got Bretta in Ireland. Welcome. Okay, so we got the outlines on there. Now, the first thing that I always do to start pretty much every painting, I kind of start the same way. We're going to start washing in the shadows. So we're going to make a nice dark purple using alizarin crimson and Payne's gray. And we are using golden fluid acrylics. But if you don't have these, it's okay. If you bought the download with the outlines, I included a list of the paints that I am using. But you know, I say use what you have, use what works for you. I love golden. I think it's the very best, but you know, don't let it hinder you from doing the demo. And maybe you can invest in some golden when you're able to. Okay, so I've got a nice little puddle here of alizarin crimson and Payne's gray. And I'm just going to start kind of working my way around and looking at what areas are dark and what areas are light. So I like to kind of start up at the top left corner, just kind of what I do. I've got this little flower shape in the background that's dark, so I'm just gonna wash that in. I'm using square tipped brushes. These are Blick Essentials from Dick Blick. They are not expensive paints, or I mean brushes. You can get like a 12 pack of them for like $13. They're cheap. But I like to just buy cheap brushes and toss them when they aren't working for me anymore. And these don't have a whole lot of life left. I'll probably need to get a new set, but when they're so cheap, I feel like I can do that. All right, so we've got a window on each side of highlight. So then I'm just gonna wash around it. Over here, it's not quite as dark, so I'm gonna thin out my paint a little bit more over here because it's darker over there. And just gonna work my way around. I'm gonna put these centers in right away because those are easy to find. We'll drop this one in too. This just kind of gives us an anchor point right away, helps us to kind of know where these flowers are. We've got some dark shadow in here. And you'll notice as you're going through, if you're doing this with me and doing the outlines download, you'll notice that I didn't go around and outline every single petal. I just picked out the petals that I felt were the most prominent, that were the most noticeable, because when you're tracing over the photograph, so what I do is I print it out in black and white and I trace over it to create these outlines. But if you start tracing over every petal, then the ones that are more important lose their importance because they get equal treatment. So I try to find the most important petals and I just outline those, and then the rest of them just don't need to be outlined. We'll figure those out later. We're just trying to find like anchor points. Hopefully that very long explanation made some sense. Maybe some light bulb moments went off for some of you. Because I know I haven't talked a whole lot about how I come up with my outlines and why I trace what I do. So I wanted to give a little more clarification with that, but I think basically a good rule of thumb is just look for the most important petals and trace those. You see how far back I'm holding my brush? This is allowing me to kind of just work my way around it, not get too hung up on the details, and just kind of move quickly through the piece. I should also mention, I know, for those of you that are watching for the first time, I know that I paint quickly. So I don't want you to be intimidated by the fact that I'm gonna do this whole painting in an hour. We have a lot of people who watch these demos and they just watch it live. Sometimes they get started on theirs and then they finish it up later on their own time. But I just try to do this quickly so that it's not boring. I know I've got about 1 hour of everyone's attention span, and I want to be able to give you something that pretty much looks like a finished product. So that's why I kind of fly through these. But I know that sometimes people will work for a few more hours afterwards, and you can always kind of pause the video and do what you need to do. That being said, I absolutely love that so many of you paint these in real time with me and then you post them right away. It just like makes my Monday night. I love seeing it. So if you guys don't know, we have a group that is open to anybody. It's called Allie's Paint Friends, and it's where everybody posts their paint along paintings after they do them. So it's always so much fun to see everyone else's different takes on the same painting demo, on the same image, and just kind of see how it's interpreted differently by different artists. And everybody is incredibly encouraging in that group and supportive of one another, and it just makes me happy. All right, so let's see, it's pretty dark right here. And again, I'm using alizarin crimson and Payne's gray, and I am watering it down right now. So everything's getting the same color treatment. We're not worrying about what the colors of things are. We're just looking, we're comparing light and dark value right now. So we're looking for the areas that are darker and washing those in. And if you guys, I always ask at the end, but I realize I should ask during the demo. If you guys are enjoying this demo, would you please share it? I would so appreciate that. I think you can just kind of hit the share button while you're watching, because that allows a lot more people to maybe be interested and learn from these, and just kind of find out about what we're up to. So I would super appreciate that. I know many of you share my demos every week, and I'm always grateful for that. That allows me to keep doing what I'm doing. Okay, so now we kind of, let's see, we pretty much have a wash all around, just kind of indicating what's light and what's dark. It's all pretty much the same treatment, pretty much washed everything in about the same. Now we're going to go back and we're going to give it another pass. So we're going to look for the areas that are a bit darker, and we're going to push those a little bit darker. So it's going to be the same color recipe, but it's going to be a little bit more opaque. So it's still the alizarin crimson and Payne's gray. And if you don't have those colors, just mix some colors together that make kind of a neutral purple. You know, maybe if you just have regular, more of like a cadmium red and, you know, an ultramarine blue, you can mix those two together. Maybe add a little bit of brown to it if you need to dull it down, or even a bit of green. But I just am trying to make this a little bit more neutral. Okay, so now we're gonna go in and we're gonna find the darkest areas. So these centers are definitely some of the darkest areas. So you can see I've got more paint on the brush. It's still the same colors as before, it's just more paint. So this is just pushing these areas a little bit darker. So this is helping us to figure out what is what. So now I kind of have to squint and look for my next darkest location. So it's pretty dark on the edge of this vase here. So I'm gonna put that in dark. And then we've got some dark shadows in between the leaves here behind these petals. Got a little bit of dark going around here. Definitely a dark little window there underneath the orange flower here. We've got some dark around the edges. And a lot of people ask, you know, if this is watercolor at this stage, because this really, we are kind of treating it like watercolor. We're pushing our dark areas and we're saving our highlights. But we aren't gonna save those white highlights until the end like you do with watercolor. We're gonna end up covering those up pretty soon. And let me know if you guys have any questions. If you're watching this live, that's the fun part about being here for the live demo, is we can chat. You can tell me what you're thinking, what you're wondering about, or even if you have questions that are unrelated to this, if they're just related to painting, I'm happy to share what I know. Okay, so going around these. And I'm using a number 4 brush for this. So I think, you know, that's actually pretty big, but I'm able to kind of get into the areas that I need to. One of my tips for painting loose is to use the largest brush that you can to get the job done. If you try to get in there with these little teeny tiny brushes, what happens is you just tighten up all over. And so I always, kind of push students to use a bigger brush if they can possibly get it in there. Got some dark there. So when we're building up all these shadows and we're making sure that they're in the right places, this is going to allow us, as we continue with the painting, it's going to allow us to even be more loose with the brush strokes when we lay down the actual color, because we're going to have this very solid roadmap telling us what is what and making sure that things are in the right place. All right. And we're just about done with this next layer of adding the darks. And again, this is still just alizarin crimson and Payne's gray. Thank you, Donna. Donna says, can you give us any hints to what you will be painting live in coming weeks? Ooh, good question. Well, I already gave it away that next week is going to be a sunflower. And I'm not sure if we're gonna do any more floral ones. This will be the 5th one in the floral series. So I've been kind of trying to work in these little series. We did 5 animals, farm animals in the last series. I do have some ideas, but I'm open to suggestions. So I would like to know what you all would like to paint. Let me know what you're thinking. I have a few possibilities. I don't do a lot of landscapes, but I know it might be fun to switch it up and do something like that. We've been doing a lot of kind of still life type pieces. So that's one possibility. I was also thinking about maybe food, like some desserts, like cupcakes and kind of fun things like that could be kind of cool. But you guys tell me what you're thinking, what you would like. All right, so let's call this layer done now, I think. So we've got 2 different layers of light and dark. It's starting to take shape. Pat says landscapes. Yes, I thought we might have some interest in landscapes. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we are going to put a wash of a complementary color underpainting in. And you can see right now I'm just kind of catching some of my drips because I really want these shadows to be dry before I start washing in the underpainting. So hopefully your paint is pretty much dry. That's the nice thing about acrylic is it does dry so quick. So I'm just kind of catching what I've got here. And then we're gonna go in with some washes. Amy says Old Barns. You know, someone else mentioned that to me too, Amy, and I do think that would be kind of fun. Maybe barns and landscapes together. That could be cool. That would go along with our little farm animal series. Okay, so let's talk about complementary color underpainting. So that means we're gonna pick a color that's kind of opposite on the color wheel, but it's not always gonna be the true opposite, but we will always do kind of a light and dark opposite, or a warm and cool, I should say, opposite. So just starting off, I'm gonna wash in the background here. This countertop is kind of a golden color. So I'm going to wash that in using Permanent Violet Dark. It's one of my favorite colors from Golden, and I love using it as an underpainting because it's just super fun and luscious. So we're gonna wash that in. You see I switched to a big brush. I've got an 8 now, so you could do like a 7 or an 8. I'm gonna wash this Permanent Violet Dark into the background here. And I'm also going to wash it in over this yellow flower right here. So we're just gonna go right over all the shadows and everything. We're just gonna go wash right over that. And I'm also gonna wash it over this little bit of greenery that's here too. So these are all warm tones and the purple is cooler. So we're just gonna put that underneath. We also have a little bit of greenery over here that I'm gonna drop this purple in and just push that and a little bit in here too. Okay, so now moving on, we've got that purple in there. Now for the 2 orange flowers here, I'm going to put down phthalo blue because orange and blue are kind of opposites. So I'm going to use phthalo blue green shade, another one of my Very favorite colors. But phthalo blue is ridiculously intense. So I'm putting a lot of water in there and I'm just going to wash this in. I might add a little bit more paint, but I'm erring on the side of thinner because I can always go back and do another pass of it. But this phthalo blue is a very intense color, but it looks really pretty as an underpainting. So we're just washing this in. Another reason why I'm watering these paints down quite a bit is then they'll dry really fast and we can just keep going. I've said this before, when I'm working on my own in the studio, you know, I can just kind of let the paint dry for a few minutes in between coats, and that's something you can do too. But for these live demos, we don't want to sit around watching paint dry, so I try to keep it moving. Okay, so we've got some blue there. Now, what color are we going to put under the rest of it? I think under the purple and under the blue vase, I'm going to put a burnt orange color. And if you've watched many of my demos, you know my recipe for burnt orange is alizarin crimson and Hansa yellow opaque. I love those two together. Makes a really, really pretty burnt orange tone. So we're gonna mix those two and just wash right over everything that we have left. And I'm not staying inside the lines, you probably have noticed. I'm letting this be loose because we want the ultimate painting to be loose, so we have the underpainting also loose. So we shouldn't have any white on the canvas now. Everything should have a pass of some color by the time I'm done with this. So again, it's alizarin crimson and Hansa yellow. I'm looking to see if anybody has anything to say about this in the comments. I'm trying to keep up with what you all are saying there. I'm gonna have to go back through and see if anybody mentioned any other ideas. I know we got for paint-alongs, I know we've got barns and landscapes. That sounded like there would be some good interest in that. Okay, so we've got our color in now, and hopefully we can still see the shadows that we laid down. That's part of the process, is that we're thinning the paint down so much that we can still see the shadows underneath. Okay, so now after we put down the complementary color underpainting, now we're going to start putting in the actual color. So again, same thing, we want this first layer to be dry before we start layering on top, because otherwise it's all gonna blend together. Tammy says, birds and butterflies would be fun. Yeah, birds would be fun. I like that idea. Melissa says, lobsters, crabs, turtles, and fish. You know, fish were one of my other things I was thinking, because fish are so beautiful with their colors. You know, they're like reflective in the scales. I think that could be really cool. I do think we might do fish, before, maybe like a whole sea series. Oh, my 6-year-old little boy would love that. He would love that. He keeps telling me I need to paint him an alligator. Okay, I'm just kind of waiting a few minutes here while this paint is drying. I think my paint on my blue here is dry enough, so maybe we could go in and do that. Okay, so let's talk about the next step. So we're going to make this kind of peachy red color using Pyrrole Red Light, Hansa Yellow Opaque, and white. And now in this next phase, I'm going to thin my paint with glaze and not water. So everyone always asks about my glaze. I say you can use any brand really. You can use Golden's glaze. I'm using Liquitex glazing medium. I like a matte finish. Someone just asked what brand of paint I'm using. I am using Golden Fluid Acrylics, which are my favorite. They are very highly pigmented, as you can see. They're very intense. Okay, so let's make that peach tone. I'm looking for a clean spot on my palette. You guys probably all have noticed I don't ever clean my palette. I just let the paint dry and then I peel it out. So this peach is going to be mostly the Pyrrole Red Light and White. We're just going to put a tiny speck of the Hansa Yellow Opaque in there. So Pyrrole Red Light and White. Pyrrole Red Light is a very orangey red to begin with, and that's why I like it. I use it a lot in skin tone because it's very warm and luscious. Okay, so let's start putting these petals in. Let's see, Cindy said she would love barns and older buildings. Yeah, that would be fun. You know, the thing about architecture is, oh, it's hard. I don't love painting architecture because with architecture, you really have to get it just right or you can tell that it's not correct. So it's definitely harder to paint it loose and have it feel loose, but still have it feel accurate. So I should mention as I'm putting these petals in, I'm being very careful to not cover up all of my blue underpainting because I want to keep that. I think it's fun. I'm going to add a little more Pyrrole Red in there. So think about this as you're layering this in. Don't cover up all the blue. We want to let that be present and hang out because that's going to be fun in the end to see that kind of twinkle against this nice coral color. And I'm thinking about the direction of my brush strokes. That is important with flowers. Let's see, Janine said seasonal paintings. Yeah, so we kind of did that with like before Christmas, I did a Christmas season of paintings and that was fun. You guys have all kinds of ideas tonight. I'm glad somebody asked about that. I think you could probably sense that maybe we're getting towards the end of the floral series. All right, moving along. Now over here, they're kind of a lot brighter. Maybe I'll put them in, but then I'm gonna lighten them. I'm gonna add a little more glaze in there. And as I'm working, you might notice that I'm kind of actively trying to cover up my outlines. So we're kind of chipping away at those because we don't really want to see those in the end. That was just kind of, you know, that early roadmap. So I'm kind of making a point to go over my outlines so that we don't see those. And if you painted your outlines in kind of dark, you'll have to work a little bit more at that. Let's see, KT says zoo animals. Yes, that would be fun. Yeah, all the different like textures. Yep, I like that. Hi, Kathy. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so now I'm going to add some more white to this, and we're going to catch some of the highlights here on these orange flowers. So it's still the same recipe, Pyrrole Red Light, Hansa Yellow Opaque, and white. I'm adding a little more white and maybe a little more of that Hansa Yellow too to make it a little bit orangier. And we'll put this into some of the brighter areas. So let's see, we've got, it's kind of bright behind this one towards the center. Ooh, I really like how this bright orange is looking with the blue. It just makes it come alive. Yes. Fun, fun. Okay, now we're gonna put some over here. And you see how I'm just kind of laying down a brush stroke and I'm letting it be. I'm not going over and over and over again. I'm just laying it down and letting it do its thing. I'm also kind of squinting every now and then and comparing it to my reference image. Okay, I think that's enough on these flowers for right now. We're gonna come back to these, but I want this to dry a little bit and then we'll add some additional tones in there. So let's see, where do we want to move to next? Why don't we go over to the yellow one, just because that's gonna give us a good anchor point as we move along. And we're gonna make this yellow tone, actually, it's gonna be using similar recipe. I think we'll just have less white in there. I'm gonna move to a new spot here on my palette, but I think it's going to be Hansa Yellow and Pyrrole Red. And maybe to start off, since that is kind of more intense, I'm just gonna put a speck of that yellow, or the white in there. So it's gonna be mostly the Hansa Yellow and Pyrrole Red with a little bit of glaze, and then just a speck of that white. And this flower is darker at the tips, so I'm gonna put this more of a golden color at the tips, and then I'm going to go in and lighten as I go, but I'm just catching this kind of at the tips. And again, I'm still leaving that purple underpainting showing. I'm just moving along, letting some of that purple sit as a shadow. Okay, now we're gonna add more white to it and catch the brighter parts around the center. So we'll add more white and probably more yellow. More white and more yellow. I like Hansa Yellow Opaque because it's a very strong yellow. It really packs a punch, and a lot of yellows are very transparent. So this one is kind of unique that way. Yeah, that looks good. Now it's starting to stand out. You make sound effects, it helps too. Okay, I'm not gonna put it on every petal the same amount because then it gets a little too uniform. All right, so we got that one in there. And I don't know if you guys notice, I keep like wiping my brush on my rag, so I always keep my rag in my hand, and then I'm just, you know, constantly washing my brush and just squeezing the old paint off and making my tip get nice and square again. I love a very nice square tip. Hi Gregory, thank you. All right, so we got a little bit of color in all these flowers. Now let's put some color into the purple ones back here. So we're going to start off with a purple that we will make from permanent dark violet and white. And I think maybe we'll just start with those two to begin with. We might end up tinting some of it a little bit more blue, but to start out with, we're gonna do the permanent dark violet and white. And we'll add a little bit of glaze in there to thin it out just a little bit. And we'll just start kind of dancing around. Now, some places it's very bright, like this one's very bright, so I'm not gonna put that one in just yet. I'm gonna start with the ones that are kind of like not quite the brightest. So we're just gonna start looking for this. It's gonna be hard to see because right now it's just against that orange tone. Maybe I'll lighten it a little bit so you guys can see them a little bit better. Adding a little more white. Hopefully you can see where I'm putting this. As we add additional highlights, it'll make it easier to see these, but right now we're just trying to kind of get some of this color in here so that it doesn't all look orange. But orange and purple play off of each other really nice, so you'll see how this will be really powerful once we build up some of these purple tones. And we want to make sure as we're putting in these petals that we're not making them all like perfectly uniform and the same, because then that just makes it look fake. So let them be random because they are random. That's how they look. Sometimes our brain tries to take over and it says, you know, each petal or each little blossom has 4 petals, and we start to make them too perfect. We don't want to do that. We just want to paint what we see, not what we think we see. So this is just, again, permanent dark violet and white. And we'll start putting some in over here, some little drops of it. And now I'm gonna add more white so that we can start really pulling those highlights out, because then they're going to start to take shape a lot more. So I'm just gonna dump some more white into my mixture. Still just the permanent dark violet and white. Make sure your white's not contaminated. If you've got like yellow in there, it's gonna kill your color. So we want it to be just those two colors. And now, like I mentioned, this blossom is definitely one of the brighter ones. So I'm gonna drop that in, still leaving some shadows of that orange tone. We don't wanna lose all that. We've got a little highlight here, a little one over here. So now I'm just gonna kind of look around and see where else I see these bright highlights. We've got some bright behind this petal. Got a bright petal right here. And this is why I like that the paints dry so quick, because I can go right back in and start layering color on top and it will not get all muddy on me. It'll just stand on its own. Catching some highlights there. All right. I think we got, we're definitely going to come back and do a lot more to these purple flowers, but I wanted to just at least get a little sense of them going. This is still all in shadow here. Because I like to get a little bit of color kind of all over my canvas. It helps me to not get too detailed in any one section, but then also it just helps me as I'm doing the demo to make sure that, that I'm able to get a little bit of something everywhere. So yeah, let's go to the next area, okay? Let's put this little window of brightness in the background. So this is kind of like a warm yellowy light that's coming through from behind the bouquet. So let's make that using white and some Hansa Yellow Opaque. And I don't know if I want to do anything else or maybe just those two. Just a tiny bit of Hansa Yellow Opaque in white. Then I'll put a little bit of glaze in there too. And so I'm just gonna carve out this area that's very bright in the background. So that'll kind of anchor everything else. And you know, I think something I wanna do is, I'm gonna put some of this bright down here too, because I feel like I didn't want it just up here. So I'm gonna just kind of mirror that with a little bit around the bouquet right here. Yeah, I like that. So that just helps us to kind of know that's like the edge of the bouquet. And maybe we got a little window of it right there too. Yeah, I like that better. All right, so we've got some in the background. Now let's put some of that pretty blue for the vase. So let's start by putting the dark blue shadows in. So it's very dark here and kind of in the center here. So we're going to make that dark, and we're actually going to use phthalo green, which seems strange because it's blue, but we're gonna use phthalo green and Payne's gray and just a tiny bit of white. And we're going to use that to make the dark tones in the vase. And I'm also gonna add a little bit of glaze. So again, that's phthalo green blue shade and Payne's gray and a little bit of white and some glaze. And a little more glaze. Okay, so I'm gonna put this into the shadows, and again, I am leaving that underpainting, some little bits of it showing, but this nice dark color is really going to make our vase pop out. It's going to make the flowers start to kind of come alive. So we're just looking for the very darkest areas here in the vase. And we're just gonna drop those in. It's not going everywhere. But if we kind of push our darks for a base to begin with, then we can layer on top of that and make the other tones really stand out nicely. All right, a little bit right there. Maybe it's not quite that dark there. Okay. I'm gonna put a little bit of this up here too, just to push that a little darker there. Okay, now let's put some of the brighter highlights in the vase. So I actually want to just add a little bit of yellow to this and a little bit of white. Now we want to be careful not to make this green like too intense. So I might need to go back and add a little more Payne's Gray to kind of mute it out. But we want it to be kind of like this, you know, 1 or 2 notches brighter and lighter than what we have. And we're just going to put in some texture and some of the reflections and leaves that are in the vase. So we've got a leaf right here, another one right there, and it's very easy to get carried away and cover up all of that orange color. So let me just warn against it. Okay. All right, that looks pretty good. Now I want to put those bright, like piercing blues into the vase, and that's going to look really good, kind of mirrored with the blue that we put underneath those other flowers. So we're going to make that nice bright blue. We're going to move to a new spot on the palette. Gotta find a clean one, and it's going to be phthalo blue and white. And I think maybe that's it. I'm going to add some glaze to it. A little more white maybe. And this is a real intense color. So it's more blue over here. I'm going to put that in first, and then I'll add a little bit more white. So it's going to kind of wrap around where this petal is. Got a chunk right there. A little bit right there. Okay, so now I'm going to add a little more white and put like those brightest highlights in right there. So now it's going to be still phthalo blue and white, but just with more white. And just dropping it in, not hesitating. And if your brush like touches some of these other areas and gets muddy, just clean it off and make a new little puddle of it. Because if you have some of that other muddier green in there, it's going to kill this phthalo blue color, and you don't want to do that. You want to let it be powerful and really stand out against the other things that are going on. So let it do its thing. Okay. We've got some other colors going on in the vase, but I'm going to stop for this for right now because I want to keep moving. I want to cover up this purple and put kind of this nice golden color in the background. So I'm going to make that golden color using alizarin crimson and Hansa yellow and just a tiny bit of Payne's Gray. That's going to mute it out a little bit. So the Hansa yellow and alizarin crimson are what we did for that burnt orange before. But now if I add a little bit of that Payne's Gray, it's going to make it more brown. And I'll put a little white in there too. So we're going to make kind of this brownish gold color. And it's darker down towards the bottom. We want to leave a good amount of that purple showing because it's cool. It's prettier than brown, but we want the brown because it's going to make the purple look cooler, if that makes sense. Make it look prettier. Now, as we get up, we want it to kind of merge with this bright highlight that we put here. It's kind of like a gradient getting brighter. So I need to lighten this. So I'm going to add more yellow and more white to it. And maybe a pinch more of the pyrrole red. Or I guess we didn't have pyrrole red in there before. Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you. And I'm adding more glaze too to thin it out so that this is going to be a little bit brighter than what was there. Add a little more yellow. And we don't need to totally blend it with this color. We just want to make some steps. We want to make it so it's not such a big transition. We need to add a little more white. My white is clogged. Okay. I hate that when the little spouts get clogged and then it all squirts out everywhere. I'm sure you guys have had that happen. Okay. So now I'm gonna get it kind of in between. You see how I'm like changing the direction of the brush strokes, and that kind of helps to create this series of the background getting lighter. Okay, I don't want to do anything more there. I'm gonna let that dry. Okay, moving forward, we need to put some of this like green foliage here. It's kind of like a warm yellowy green. We haven't done any of that yet. So we're going to make that green, which is going to be more of like an olive green. One of my pet peeves is when floral paintings have greens that are like too grassy green that just like give you a headache. So I don't want to do that. So we're going to dull it down. And we will start with Hansa Yellow Opaque. We're going to add just the tiniest speck of phthalo green. I got too much. And when we mix those two together, I think you guys can see this color. It's horrible. Do you see how terrible that color is? So we're gonna dull it down by adding some Pyrrole Red light to it. A lot more yellow. Pyrrole Red light and yellow. And that is going to give us more of a natural looking olivey green. I'm gonna add some glaze to it. And I'm gonna start dropping this into some of the leaves here. So again, it's Hansa Yellow Opaque, phthalo green blue shade, and then I added Pyrrole Red light to it. And we have these kind of wispy ones that are going in front of the vase here that I was kind of painting around before, but now I can drop it in. We have another one like right there. And got some little bits here. Maybe I want a little piece of it right there. And so this looks pretty good against the purple too. I think we will need to add a few darker greens like down here. That's kind of darker, but for right now, I just wanted to get some of this green color on the canvas. And kind of, we need to put some in between here. Got a little bit right here. And then I'm gonna use some of this up here on this one in the background too. Just a little bit. This one's kind of dull because it's backlit, so we don't see the green color quite so much. But I wanted to just get a little bit in there. Maybe put some in there too. Sometimes you gotta do what works. You know, if you want a little more extra green up here, I think I do, we'll just add that in. All right. Now we need to push some of our dark purples. We haven't really pushed any of the shadows in the purple yet. So we're going to make the darker purple, and let's see, I think maybe we'll just start by using permanent dark violet and a little bit of white, but it's gonna be more of the permanent dark violet. I need to get myself some more. I've heard that permanent dark violet is hard to get, and I'm sorry if you can't find it. A good substitute if you don't have permanent dark violet is quinacridone magenta with a little bit of blue. I don't know if you guys can see that. So if you mix those two together, you'll get something similar to permanent dark violet, if you can't find it. I luckily had a giant bottle, so I think I'll be good for a while. Okay, so again, this is permanent dark violet, white, and a little bit of glaze. And I'm going to just push this into some of the shadows here. Yeah, that's gonna really make them come alive. So it's all just kind of this push and pull. We kind of start in the middle, we find the bright highlights, and now we're pushing those darks area. Blech. Sorry guys, it's getting to be the end of the demo and I'm like losing my ability to speak. But this will just kind of make the bright areas pop out when we surround them with something that is darker than them. Just gives everything else a lot more kick when it's got that dark behind it. And I'm gonna put a little of this around my centers too. We're gonna do a little more detail in the centers there, but just for now, I'm gonna drop some of this dark purple into this one, especially. It was a little too light. So again, this is still just permanent dark violet, white, and a little bit of glaze. And maybe I'll put a little on the edges of this thing too, just to kind of push that a little darker, kind of like that. Okay, got a few little bitty pieces there. All right, now we have a few more little dark places I need to add. Okay, now I want to add some variation to the purple tones. So I want to pick a few places to put kind of a brighter bluish highlight. I talked about that earlier, that I might want to drop some brighter blue highlights in. So we're going to make a new color using the permanent dark violet, but now we're going to add a little bit of phthalo blue to it, just a tiny, tiny bit. And then we're going to add a lot of white to it. So this is going to be more of like a cool periwinkle blue, and that's going to contrast the warm blue that we've put down already. So we want this to be really pretty light. And I see some of these nice bright highlights up here. Might even add a little more white. So again, it's permanent dark violet and a little bit of phthalo blue and white, quite a bit of white. And I'm not going to put these cooler highlights everywhere, but I am kind of looking for the areas on the piece where I feel like I see some of those cooler tones. Also, I'm just kind of looking for like where it works with the composition and where I want to put it. So that feels pretty good there. I want to make this flower even brighter. I'm going to add more white and really pump up this petal right here. So this blossom. Yeah, I like that. Okay, I also think it would be fun to add some areas of more of a magenta purple. We've got a little bit down here. So we're gonna make that magenta purple using permanent dark violet, but now we're gonna add in a little bit of that quinacridone magenta that I mentioned earlier. And so this is going to make it more of like a pinky purple. And we'll also have some white in there, and I'm just gonna drop this into a few areas. You can see it's warmer, it's just a little bit different. So when you're doing flowers, kind of having all of these different like warm and cool variations of all different types of purple or blue or yellow or whatever it is you're doing, it's what makes it feel natural. It makes them feel like they're not silk flowers, like they're real live flowers. So kind of playing around with these different tones. Yeah, I like that. Okay, I don't want to get too carried away with the purple because I still want to do some work on these because these are really like my focal point here. Really want to pop these out. Just looking at our time. Ooh, we've got 5 minutes left. Okay, so let's find the most important stuff and throw that in the last 5 minutes. All right. Okay, so I think most important is going to be to really brighten up these centers and make that more intense. So we're going to, if you remember, the color that we mixed this with was Pyrrole Red Light, Hansa Yellow Opaque, and white. But now we're going to use more white, and I'm actually going to give myself a fresh little well of white here because I don't want to use a white that's contaminated at all. I want to make sure there are no other colors in there. So it's, again, Hansa Yellow Opaque, Pyrrole Red Light, and white. And I'm not going to put any glaze in it now because I really want this to be strong and opaque. And I'm going to put this in. I grabbed a slightly smaller brush because I want to get a little more detailed with where I put this color, because it's not going everywhere. It's just going in those very brightest places in the center. And you know, one of the problems if you are putting highlights on a flower and you put the same kind of highlight on every petal, then it loses its impact. So that's why you want to kind of save those brightest highlights and put them in where they're the most important so that you can get the most bang from them. So that looks pretty good. Let's see, this petal, the whole thing is actually pretty bright. Got this one too. It's pretty bright right there. I might need to do a few more little doses of that orange color too, I think. So, but yeah, that brightened up my centers pretty well, but now I actually want to intensify the tips a little bit more. So now I'm going to add some more Pyrrole Red and some more Hansa Yellow to make more of an intense orange. So now it's going to have less white in it, and I'm just going to go over and intensify some of the tips. So it's Pyrrole Red and Hansa Yellow, adding that in. Thank you, Elena. All right, so let's find those tips that we really want to glow. So there we go. I'm not going to do it on all of them. I'm just going to do it on the ones that I feel like I really want to pop out. Add a little more Pyrrole Red. Yeah, that's making those flowers definitely stand out. And I'm being kind of careful about how I treat the shape of the tips. I'm letting that be pretty clean. Because that gives the flower a nice form. Yeah, this nice bright red is definitely helping. It's kind of just pulling those flowers out of the background. All right, I like that. And let's do the same thing over. No, I take that back. I'm good with this one. I was gonna say, let's do. Yes, let's do it. We're gonna. I want to go over this one a little bit more. So remember, this was the same recipe, but with more yellow in there. So I'm just gonna kind of pull those out, clean up that shape a little bit in a few places. So it's got more of the Hansa Yellow, a little bit more of the white. Just want to clean that up. And as we layer more, they just kind of come out a little bit because they have less of that purple underpainting that would be kind of dulling them down. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. And while we've got that color on the brush, kind of this bright orangey yellow, I think I do want to do these little bitty pieces in the center here. They're kind of these little balls. I would say don't get too carried away. I don't know. I need to switch to a smaller brush. Maybe. I don't want them to be too intense. I'm going to take a little bit of paint off my brush. Let them be a little... I will say don't make all these spots the same shape or equally placed, or it will kind of ruin it. It'll make them look weird. So less is more with these little dabs, and you could even just not do them if you don't want to. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep them or not. Ooh, those got a little too big. And it's only on these, I guess. Just do a little bit. Yeah, we'll see. All right. Let me see what else we need to definitely get done before we call this piece finished. You know, there's a little bit more texture in some of these shadows that I put in. So I'm gonna go back to my purple and white recipe, and I'm just gonna add a little bit more texture to some of those dark areas. Just layering a few more petals on top. And you might not need to do that, but I just noticed mine's kind of, there were like these big blobs of purple that I feel like I wanted to give a little bit more shape to. Okay, we've got some other colors down here in the vase that we didn't quite get into. There's kind of like this bluish purple shape right here that I left open. So let's make that shape using the permanent dark violet and the phthalo blue. So that's gonna make kind of this periwinkle. We'll add a little white in there, and we'll just put some of that into this shape in the background. Need to add a little more white to it, I think. Yeah. And I've got a little bit of it over here. Maybe a little bit over here. There's always a lot of colors going on in something like a vase that's very reflective. But my best advice is don't overdo it. You don't want to get too drawn into that and be spending all your time trying to get the reflections in there. I think before I call this one done, there's kind of like this little halo of purple around my centers of these, and I want to drop that in. It's kind of like a nice warm purple. So let's put that kind of surrounding the centers, and I'm going to make that using the quinacridone magenta and white, and let's see, a little bit of the phthalo blue. I'm just going to tone it down a little bit with the phthalo blue. Quinacridone magenta, white, phthalo blue, add a little glaze. And let's put a nice little ring of that, but don't put it in too perfect. Kind of going around the centers. Ooh, yeah, I like that. Don't put it in too even, but that's kind of making those stand out like that. On this one, it's a little bit lighter, but we'll just put it in the same for right now. And then what you might want to do after you get that purple in is you might want to go back and have some petals kind of overlap it. So go back in with a little bit of that petal color, and we just want it to lay it on top of what we see there, just kind of like that, just to make it look like we didn't do that last, where it's like laying on top. I think that'll be good. Yeah, because it's kind of showing up more in the shadows. Okay, I think we're almost done. I'm just looking at my last wraps. I want to put a couple more pops of really bright blue in the vase. So I'm going to go back to my white and phthalo blue. It's going to be mostly white though. And we just want to make it a notch brighter than what we have there. And just do those final little blue sparkle dashes that I always like to do at the end that you guys are familiar with. We're just gonna drop those in right on top. Just kind of gives it that extra little bit. A little bit right there. And maybe I wanna do just a tiny bit up here too. We'll see. Yeah, I like that. Somebody might need to stop me. Okay, looking at my time, see if I have time. Okay, I'm gonna do one more thing. We never put this very dark center in. We just kind of washed it in with some purple. And I think the one over here is gonna look better if we make that really dark. So I never buy black. I always just mix my blacks. So we're gonna mix a black using Payne's Gray and alizarin crimson. Those are my colors for black. So we're gonna make this nice and dark. And I'll add a little bit of glaze in there to thin it out a little bit. And then I'm going to use this to just to push some of those darkest areas. So like the center of this flower is definitely dark. So we're gonna drop that in, and a little bit, we're gonna clean up the shape of this one a little bit too with some of this dark. And maybe a little bit here, which will maybe cover up some of my little knobs that I don't love. Yeah, that just pushing that dark really helps. Now let me just look and see. We could put a little bit more dark into some of the spaces between the petals, which will also make those petals stand out even a little bit more, putting this dark black in towards the end. And this is kind of, you know, the same way I do most of my pieces, where I kind of save these brightest brights and darkest darks and drop them in at the end, and it really just makes it take shape. And I should mention it again, if you are painting this along with me, congrats to you, and I'm so proud of you, and I hope that you will share your painting in our open group, Allie's Paint Friends. You can search for it and find it on Facebook or on my page. You should be able to find a link to it, but definitely share what you did, because a lot of people are painting with you and they will love to see what you create, and I love to see what you create. So I'm thrilled when you guys share that. And then of course, if you haven't gotten the download yet and you want to do it, you can find that on my website, alliekstudio.com. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. I've said that a few times, but I'm gonna stop now. All right, so here's kind of how mine turned out. And I hope that you all had fun painting with me and watching. And again, please share this if you enjoyed this demo. I greatly appreciate it. Just looking through last couple questions here. Someone asked if this is watercolor. Nope, this is acrylic. We're using golden fluid acrylics. And let's see, Sharon said, if you have more time, would you do the leaves and stems? Yeah, I would probably add a few little bright highlights of green in there, but I don't think it's that important. So usually I will, I usually work on mine a little bit more on Tuesday morning, so I'll share this after it's totally done. But I encourage you all to share yours right away, and you can always share them again after you tweak it, but it's great to kind of get other people's inputs on it. Everybody is so nice. We have the best people that watch these demos. So once again, thank you for watching. I hope you will paint it. And don't forget, if you are interested in my Photoshop class, Digital Editing Basics, you have until Sunday to register and get the early intro pricing. So I hope you'll check that out. All right, everybody have a good night, and I'll see you next week, Monday. All right, bye guys.